So Chris Dancy, you people in the audience, you saw my presentation, and I had this calendar where I'm putting all my activities automatically. Chris was an inspiration for that. I did my own programming. He has done this kind of work, my understanding is already a few years. He was on the Wired magazine, represented as the most quantified man in the world. How many sensors do you have on you right now?
6.
So there are 6 sensors on this guy at the moment, and you cannot see it. So this is definitely a really, really interesting topic. So why don't you, Chris, introduce yourself briefly to everyone here, and then we continue with a few questions on the purposes and opportunities in self-quantification and self-tracking.
Sure. So I went ahead and developed a few
Let me close
slides to kind of explain a little bit about what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and start with those. I live in Denver. I've spent some time in Helsinki, so hello. Hi, I love Helsinki. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slides real quick and just kind of run through this. Should take less than 3 minutes to go through these if I've timed them correctly. So hold on 1 second while we go into a little bit of a time warp. And then hopefully you're seeing that. I know you have me muted, but basically a few years ago I was at a conference where I talked a little bit about using your body, as you guys would know, as a platform for technology. Last year I upped that a little bit to how we would tie our body and self-tracking and quantified self into a platform of data that could be used for folks to look at how they work, what they do for work, but really self-optimize themselves for types of work. This year in London, actually next week, I'll be talking about this concept of using your existence, everything around you, as a platform for development. It came from this concept that my friends keep saying there's too much information and we're giving away too much data, and I feel that you can use your data, your exhaust from everything that you do, to actually optimize your life. And if we look at our lives today, it's pretty obvious that we're already being surveilled by our governments, by our parents, by our friends. And the time that we're about to enter into is really no different, except I feel it's a time of surveillance. So where the people with the actual authority will be those who understand their own data exhaust, but more importantly, will be able to optimize their environment for that. I noticed about 3 years ago that the amount of data I was able to capture was exponentially growing via API and sensors. So from the left, we have data captured in a single photo, where I was, what I saw, the temperature, what music I was listening to, all the way through to an experience, all the way through to a single journey, which led me to create this low friction data collection scale. So all the way to the right, writing on a cave wall would be very high friction. But as you move to the left, it becomes easier and easier to collect data, and therefore you should or could and actually use that data to do interesting things. I found for my life there were really 10 areas that this fell into: health, entertainment, environment, social, knowledge work or work, travel, opinion, content, money, and spiritual. So there's sensors and data being collected in all these areas of my life. If I actually look at the content as it exists today, there's just too much to look at with thousands of different services and sensors and devices and applications for me to really get my head around. So what I started realizing was if I could capture this data in a meaningful way, I might be able to benefit from it. And I noticed that all the data was either falling into something that was very hyper-personal, hyper-communal, or something that actually benefited the good of mankind, which allowed me to create my first version of Maslow's hierarchy of digital quantified self. And the idea was I wanted to understand out of the different ports of data exhaust where I was actually getting the most benefit, and actually start to focus in on those areas if I needed to give other areas more attention. Today I have anywhere from 300 to 400 systems monitoring me at all times. That's not just the sensors I wear, but it's the applications I use, the devices in my house. I switch devices and sensors as often as possible. Everything falls into an Evernote, which is for archival purposes. It falls into a Google Calendar for UX, UI, falls into a spreadsheet, and there are programs that I think will probably start to be able to analyze this stuff. So, as Timu mentioned earlier, this is my calendar. Some things I've learned, there are certain types of television that I need to watch if I want to eat healthier. Because of air sensors, I know there are certain times I should leave the house. There's certain music I can listen to that actually get types of work done. Sleeping habits. Also, my entire house is set for humidity and temperature. And also, I know there's certain types of music. So basically, I created these lifestyle recipes. Probably the most interesting thing I found was the data exhaust is one thing that I track, but the reflection to the exhaust is different. So how these other systems interact with the data that I create starts to produce a digital footprint so that I can actually see tracks in the sand as I move forward. And this has led me to believe that you could actually create a platform for existence. So devices merged with APIs and automation engines around analytics to create a new version of reality. So the user interface would be application, senses, devices. The automation would be systems and engines like APIs, Zapier, and IFT. And today we already have something like this. You've got your do-it-yourself stuff through Zapier and IFT. You've got crowdsourced experience recipes with things like Q, and then run program that actually tells you what songs to listen to for optimal beats per minute. And you've got professional recipes, things like Amplify, which actually use sensors and music and light. The Quantified Self plus Internet Things creating an experience platform really breaks down into these really unique recipes that you can really plug in anything. So if the plants are dry, make my house this warm, make my music this way, change the lights to this, and tell the dogs to get off the couch. So there are a lot of things you can do with this moving forward. It really comes down to you have an implicit input as a human. Contextually, that information is processed, sent to an application, which is tied to the Internet of Things, which then feeds back and creates an alternate reality for you to live in. So basically optimizing your life, your work, etc. I'll end with 2005. I saw this presentation from Kurzweil about humans and people merging, and I thought it was pretty amazing. Next week, I'm going to New York to see Dmitry Itskov talk about his 4 levels of avatar. But I believe in some ways we're already there. My data's already commingled with my dog, my home, and the different devices in my house. I believe that we're organic at that level, and we could actually create experiences that are powerful, not only for ourselves personally, but for each other as humans. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So the way how I understood from your presentation, you have so many sensors going on that you have already moved on from yourself to your dog. Is that right?
Correct.
So what have you learned by doing all this self-tracking? You already gave a few ideas on the benefits of seeing certain patterns emerging over time. So what is the benefit of, let's think about this from the macro level and from the micro level.
I think one of the first benefits I found was just the health benefits. I mean, that's one of the biggest areas that this exists in. I personally have lost 60 pounds this year and really haven't changed my diet that much, but just being aware of the numbers was enough. The other thing was having the data be visually represented to you actually helps you understand correlations. So I actually was having unhealthy eating patterns, and I was actually less likely to move or exercise if there were certain conditions within my life. And until those conditions were collected and visualized, I actually didn't have the ability to see those patterns. But it affects a lot more things. I find that if I spend money on gifts for friends, or I spend money on things that are not needed, things that aren't necessary for myself, that what I'll do is I'll actually eat worse almost 8.5 to 9.5 hours later every single time. But I would have never been able to see that relationship before.
Okay, so, well, you dwelled into personal development areas and health and those aspects. So how do you see this, for example, from the perspective of professional life, developing your skills and making yourself more viable for the organization you're working for?
I think that's probably the most important reason I do this. I'm 44 years old, and what I've noticed is there's a growing number of underemployed in the United States. And these are people who are well educated, that have more than enough going on in their lives that there's no reason for them to be underemployed or unemployed. So I think for professionals, it's so very important, if we look forward to the next 7 years, to understand the new types of knowledge work that we'll do. For me, it's very much a mission. We must understand our relationship to data and the world around us. And as more and more of that becomes quantifiable or cybernetic, those are skills that I think we need to talk about. I've said in interviews before, and I sometimes get in a little bit of trouble, but so much of my adult life was spent answering emails or making calendar appointments. And that really didn't accomplish much, but it created this idea, this level of collaboration. I truly collaborate with my environment now. And I think in the future, if we just go 7 years out, a concept of a social GPS, where I could take my data and intermix it with data from people at the conference. We could say, hey, we want to accomplish this problem. We want to solve this issue, and actually plot a course for doing that. That's really where I see the future of work. I think there are many steps we'll make along the next 7 years, but I think our relationship to data and understanding to optimize situations at a personal level, at a work level, and at a human level will really work itself out over the next 10 to 15 years.
So, can you talk a little bit about collecting this data automatically? And obviously, it's not about the tracking, it's about the insights you can gain, right? So data doesn't mean that you have information or even knowledge about it. So you must have been, learning all kinds of Jedi skills while doing this kind of activity for so long time. So Chris, you are in the future, so tell us a little bit about what you have found out about the aspects of tracking and also looking at the data.
I think one of the most important things I found was it's not easy. Most of these organizations don't make the data or their devices easy to access. I don't want to say there's a conspiracy, but it certainly looks like one. For most people to get their data out of their devices, they have to go to some website and log in and see these charts, and it's not easy. So to me, data and technology, these devices and sensors really come down to a lot like healthy eating, right? My mom would say to me, Chris, eat vegetables and, don't drink soda and don't, do all these other things. And I think as I look at technology and applications and services, it doesn't matter if it's a cloud service or anything else, I want something that empowers me. And that empowerment really comes from, does it provide me the information in a format that I can consume and use? So, I will constantly get a different device or switch off, go from one service to another if it gives me access to data. And I think that's something I didn't expect. I didn't think I'd go through devices and applications and services so quickly. But what I find is the services that actually make it easier for me to get to the data is really where I want to be headed. The services I use to collect the data, and that's very simple. I just, you can use anything from an RSS feed to an API to manually writing something down. I personally feel that automation systems like Zapier, while they're not meant for this, the way that one of their founders would tell you, that's not what I pictured. It doesn't matter. It's what I think it's more important. It's what we do with the work. It's what we do with the data. So
you talked about that you go out and you search for a way to capture some data points and you might be changing a device. So
can someone design these things for you? So can an organization, for example, wire and arm their employees with these kind of tracking devices and make them beneficial for them? Or is it always contextual so that you choose what apps you use? Because the apps that I have installed on my phone is probably different than the next person here. And that's the beauty of it, that is the whole mass customization of the whole experience and the whole, it's a rabbit hole to go, down deep into understanding, what kind of apps you really should be using to get the most benefit out of it. So how do you see this? Is it something that you can package, put into organizations, into productive use, or is it always going to be for those people who are in the forefronts who, have the motivation and intuition to go deep into it?
So I think I have to use a little bit of my age here. So in the 90s, I had to learn the OSI layers, which explain the hardware extraction and the different layers when you're programming. And I think in very much the way the cloud is in some ways in its infancy, I think that, even though we all have different devices, I think there will be some data layer. There are a couple of projects that I've seen where people are working on things they've called the human API. This is really no different than what I remember in the early 80s when we would hack our PCs and we would try to get them to talk to each other or try to use different devices. So I think if I was developing software or hardware, I would definitely be starting out with a foundation of what's the lowest layer of data that I can collect, that I can make available to an anonymous group of people, the user itself, and my company. So there's really, I think from a business model, there's 3 different ways of looking at it. I see the anonymous data being really important because, you look at what body media is doing with disposable sensors. Here in the United States, it's $15 or $20 to go to a movie, and some families can't afford $15 per person. But if they could wear a disposable sensor and collect anonymous data, that would be very powerful for Hollywood, because at that point, they could edit movies in real time or between showings with that anonymous data. So again, thinking about the lowest layer, whether you're hardware or software, whether you're a service or a sensor, and segmenting the data in those 3 ways, I think would be important right now.
All right, so
we are having this on Google Hangout. Probably this is also going through the NSA servers or something like this. So, this whole idea of,
I hope so. They send me here.
Yeah. So the whole question about privacy. Give us a doomsday scenario, or give us a way out. Give us a way out.
Gosh, I don't do well with doomsday. People already assume I'm a doomsday person, and I'm not. I do this because I believe there's great power in understanding yourself. Just read a little Plato or a little Socrates, and you can understand there's great power in understanding yourself at this level. I think the exciting part of this is no matter how much NSA crazy talk goes on or how much FUD gets thrown around, the reality is no one understands me and my devices as well as I do. So it's very empowering as an employee and as a human and as a citizen, as a global citizen, to take control of this and to know that I have control. I read an article in The Guardian where the author said, if you actually knew how much they could collect, you'd be scared. Well, I challenge PRISM. If you actually knew how much I could collect, you should be scared. So I don't think it's doomsday at all. I think I own this, and you need to talk to me. You need to talk to people like us. We're the people you didn't see coming.
That's a fantastic way to put it. We are the people you didn't see coming. I think we can actually, give the microphone to someone in the audience to ask, because Chris can perfectly hear. So, is anyone here who wants to, give Chris, some question? Give a good run for his money.
I can try to answer in Finnish. It's just not easy.
Yeah, you should come to Finland again. Rita told me
About that you were here at some point. So here is one. Was there also one? Yeah. Okay. So here I have one person. I'm sorry I cannot turn the camera, but you will hear.
You're fine.
hi, I'm a senior engineer, it says I have a background in standardization. So I wanted, this human API I think actually could be really important. So can you elaborate a bit? Is there actually some kind of standardization or something like that going on, or what would you say about that? Because I think it's probably really essential for this to scale to larger consumer use.
So human APIs.
So one is by one of the founders of Foursquare. The other one's more open source. You can actually just look up human API online. I think in some ways, the research that I've looked at around the human API is very splintered because people really haven't considered at a very low level yet, someone at your level, what we would need to connect these things. And we almost need an IP routine, a subnet, as it were, or a second internet to collect these things, so a transport mechanism, and then a data collection, or at least a data definition layer. Those things aren't going to come very easy. We still struggle with logging into websites with email and passwords. But I do think they'll actually be solved before the email and password problem is. You just need to look into it and lead. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of people leading the charge. I think someone said to me, you know, we really wish you'd stop talking about this so publicly. And I said, why? And they said, we're trying to develop, you know, software and solutions, and we can't make all this money if you keep talking to people. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work out, you know, in the past, or it created an elite group of people, and that's not going to happen on my watch. So I'm going to continue to meet people and talk out about this.
All right, is there still someone who wants to open up? Yeah, there is one. Just a moment.
Hi there, my name is Nina. Hi, I'm pretty new to all this, and I don't know if you can see me, and I hope I won't be, people won't throw eggs at me, but I have a slightly hard question for you to answer. Do you, since you've been following possibly your mood and your health and everything through, if I can call them gadgets, do you ever panic if they fail? Do you know how you feel without them?
That's wonderful. I actually had an interviewer ask me that recently. Do I unplug and do I feel and all these other kind of things? I think the reality for me is very simple. So it's kind of, there was a movie in the United States, and I don't know how broadly it was distributed, but it was called The Sixth Sense. And it had this little kid, and he saw dead people, but no one believed that he saw dead people. And by the end of the movie, the person he'd been talking to, his psychiatrist, said, you know, you don't understand, I see dead people. And it turns out the psychiatrist was dead. And for me, I understand what's going on in that movie, because once you see data, you can't unsee it. So even though I might unplug and take devices off and stop tracking, my life was irrevocably changed the moment I saw data. It reminds me of The Matrix, when, you know, the screens look all green and they're falling and no one really understands, you know, except the person who's staring at it. He can see the people and the images behind it. So yeah, I still feel without these things. I prefer not to, not because I need them, but I found that people will believe a link before they'll believe what you tell them. So if I tell you, gosh, it was so exciting to be at this conference today, you can go, oh yeah, he's just saying that. But if I send you a link to like my heart rate, my skin temperature, and everything else, you'll believe the link. I don't know what's wrong with people. They'll believe something you can link to, but they won't believe you crying, you know, weeping with joy in front of them. So yeah, I still feel, but I do it more for you than for me.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris, you know, for your thoughts and your time. This went well over time, and but you know, I think we are all speechless about your insight and words about these what data can reveal about ourselves and how it can open up new doors to consciousness as well. So thank you very much, and hope to see you in Finland very soon, or the other way around.
I'm sure I'll be there very soon. I love Finland. Kiitos.
Kiitos.